are listening to the Devoted Dreamers podcast, and I'm your host, Merritt Onsa. I believe God has an unfolding plan for your life, a God-shaped dream just for you. But so much gets in the way, right? Fear, comparison, imposter syndrome. What if I mess this up? You are not alone in those feelings, and I'm so glad you're here for Season 8. Keep listening to gain some transformational tools that will help you release the lies so that you can freely show up in the world, offering your gifts, leaning on God in your weaknesses, and serving His kingdom with the dream He's given you. Hey dreamers, this is episode 180, and it's a solo episode today. And I'm kind of looking at that number going, how did we get here? 180 episodes in. I was actually scrolling through the podcast archives the other day. Do you know we have archives? It's on my website. You can just go to merrittonsa.com, hit the About menu, and then hit the drop down for podcast archives. And that's where you can find every episode I've ever done in the order that I've published them. It's a great place to go if you're looking for a particular topic or a guest. You can easily search the page and find exactly what you feel like you might want to listen to in that moment. Anyway, I was scrolling through the 4+ years of episodes just the other day, and it was like walking back through time. It was actually quite sweet to think back on all the different guests, to see their names, just kind of to see that image of the journey into solo episodes and just everything that has kind of progressed along the way, the seasons of my life that have dictated the flow of the show. Like all these little pieces, as I looked at those archives, just came rushing back for me. And it was actually a really quick and sweet way that I got to quietly celebrate so much of what has transpired since I began this little dream. And it got me thinking and wondering and really admitting to myself, I am not very good at celebrating accomplishments. I'm more than a little bit type A. And so I am usually off and running to check the next thing off my list after I finish something, even if it's just a podcast episode, rather than taking the time to see where I've been and give a little hoopla and hooray and reflect on where I've been and how I can learn from it. I just don't do that very often. And honestly, that's not a strategy I'm recommending, but it definitely relates to what I'm talking about today in this episode, which is the number 2 most requested topic in my Devoted Dreamers Facebook group. And it's just what the title says. Planning your dream while doing your dream. And if you're not in the Facebook group, look for the link to join in the show description when you're done listening to this episode, or just go to bit.ly/dreamer group. Answer a few quick questions. I'll let you in and you can start getting to know everybody. You can even hit pause on this episode right now and go do that. I'll wait. And before we jump into the content today, I want to talk directly to you if you've ever considered starting a podcast. Like if that's the dream you feel ready to work on in a planning while doing kind of way. This is like that analogy, by the way, of flying the plane while you're building it. So if you're kind of a bootstrapper like me, you know what I'm talking about. But if a podcast is in your future, like in the real near future, I hope you'll consider joining me and brand strategy coach Natalie Arndt for our beta version podcasting program launching the first week of January. We are opening the doors for students who want access to this material at a deeply discounted rate, while also serving on our team of beta testers who are going to help make this program the very best it can be when it opens up again later next year. So if you're freaked out about the tech or not sure you'll have enough to say, or you're battling the demons in your mind that tell you you've got no business starting a podcast, we're going to be addressing every single one of those topics and more for an 8-week group program in January and February that'll help you and hold you accountable to getting your podcast launched by March 1st. You can totally do it because we will be there to help. Registration is only $197 and doors close this Friday, December 18th. So don't wait. Go register now. The link to get to the registration page is at nataliearndt.com/podcast beta. But just in case you're listening to this at a later date, that link will still work for you to join the waitlist so we can let you know when the program is opening up again. Okay, on to planning your dream while doing your dream. Let's dig into this. So I had a disclaimer the last solo episode I recorded, and it turns out I have another one for this episode. So if you're a project manager, an engineer, maybe an Enneagram 5, or if you were my boss back in the day when I was hired to work for a .com in the middle of the boom in the early 2000s, this episode is probably going to make your skin crawl. Now, I'm not advocating for not planning or throwing strategy out the window. I'm not saying don't work alongside wise people or seek out mentors who can support you on your journey. This planning while doing thing is more about the psychological aspects of getting started when you already feel there are a lot of internal barriers to pursuing your dream. So let me just say for the record, I'm all for planning. I'm all for strategic decision-making. I'm all for consulting with mentors and seeking wisdom and writing business plans and marketing plans. Do those things. But don't let your need to do those things or your desire to do things perfectly stand in the way of just getting started. That is the point of this conversation. Because your dream is far too important to waste or to keep hidden or to let stay buried because you're so busy planning. And I want to start off with the premise, and this is point number 1 for this episode. I want to start off with the premise that God has designed you with a purpose and how important it is for you to believe that. And this is going to feel like a bit of a primer, this little section, if you've been around here at the podcast for a while, but bear with me as I speak for a moment to those of you who have just arrived. You are God's workmanship. You're his poetry, a translation of Ephesians 2:10 says. That verse in, I think this is the ESV, it says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." God has given you gifts that are uniquely yours. Romans 12:6. This is the Passion Translation. I love the Passion Translation. It says, "God's marvelous grace imparts to each one of us varying gifts and ministries that are uniquely ours." And that whole section goes on to talk about the specific gifts God gives: prophecy, teaching, giving, generosity, serving. There's a whole bunch in there. But the point of this, that it's by God's grace, his marvelous grace, that he gives each one of us gifts and ministries that are uniquely ours. So if you've doubted that God has given you a purpose, it's right there. He's given you gifts to use so that we would use these gifts for the praise of his glory. And these are some of my favorite verses in Ephesians 1. This is the ESV, verse 13 and 14. It says, "In him you also, when you heard the word of truth, the gospel of your salvation, and believed in him, were sealed with the promised Holy Spirit, who is the guarantee of our inheritance until we acquire possession of it, to the praise of his glory." So we are to use what we've been given, the truth that we've heard, the gospel of our salvation, our being sealed with the Holy Spirit, our being guaranteed an inheritance. We are to use all of those things for the praise of God's glory. Now, I've talked a whole lot more about this in some other episodes of the podcast. So if you just check out the show description in your podcast listening app, I've linked to a couple more episodes on this topic that you may enjoy in case you're new around here. And if you are, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. But what I need you to know from those verses and from this first point, that God designed you with a purpose, is that if he designed you with a purpose, you do not have to fear the outcomes of the steps you will take in walking into that purpose. Even if you're not entirely sure exactly what that purpose is, you do not have to fear the outcomes of the steps you will take walking into that purpose, because God is with you. He is in you. His Spirit lives in you if you've accepted Christ as your Savior. So you do not have to fear. You can walk forward anyway. So point number 2 is, therefore, don't let planning stand in the way of action taking, right? especially if you're in the early stages of something like a God-shaped dream, especially if you are prone toward perfectionism or seeking approval or performance. Guilty, right over here. You will plan all day and tweak it a million times, and it'll never be good enough if that's what you decide to do instead of taking action. You will be planning and planning and planning, but done is better than perfect. I'm sure you've heard this. Done is better than perfect. So let's do something instead of just planning to do something. Of course, be diligent in prayer. Seek the Father, dwell with him, ask him for directions and guidance, and listen for his response. That may require you to just pause and be quiet and at peace and settled and not stressing out about what to do next. But in the absence of answers, like if you do pray and you seek him and you ask and wait on his response and you do not hear an answer, it is okay to keep taking steps forward. Do the best you know how to do with the information that you have right now. Not getting a clear answer doesn't mean that you can't go ahead. If you start to go ahead and God doesn't want you to go ahead, don't you think it's in his power to pull you back or stop you, right? Why are we so afraid to take a step when we don't have this booming voice from heaven or this chills down our back or whatever it is we think is the response of God? It is okay to take a step and see what happens. I think he's going to let you know if you're going down the wrong way. And a little bit of my personal experience on this one is I often hear from podcasters that they want to know, how did you decide to do seasons the way that you do? I hear that question a lot, not always directed specifically at me, but I'm one of those people out there who does seasons. And honestly, when I answer that question, my answer is that I did what was best for my stage of life, for whatever I was going through at that time. So in the summer of 2018, I took the summer off of podcasting when I had a baby. I did a couple little mini episodes, things I had recorded in advance. But other than that, I think it was 3 whole months off of podcasting. And then I also realized that podcast listens go down at Christmas time. If you're listening to this in January, hi, thanks for being here. So I don't often record an episode for the week of Christmas. In fact, last year I took 6 weeks off around Christmas in the early part of January. This year, I kind of feel like I still have things I want to say and interviews I want to share with you. So definitely come back on December 30th. I'll be here. But now I do a whole lot more planning of the podcast than I did in the beginning. But because I tend to be a perfectionist and I know sometimes not planning can actually be more helpful in living out of the freedom that God's already given me to trust what might happen without the plan in place. Today, I wrote this episode just minutes before I started recording, and it's okay. I had the title before, and that was it. And I just asked God, show me what you want me to share today. And so while I still do some planning, I kind of decided that it is okay for me to make decisions a little bit on the fly, as long as they kind of are still running along the same tracks that I have been running. I'm not about to go start a YouTube channel when I've been podcasting for 4.5 years. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm not saying you can't, but that's kind of what I'm saying is that I'm making decisions for what's best, that's going to work within the time that I have available and in the context of the aspects of my dream that I am currently pursuing. Okay? So point number 3 of this planning your dream while doing your dream is that you can make a habit of trying new things. When you've got your whole year planned out, it's a little bit harder to do that. But when you're kind of working on the fly, pursuing the dream on the fly, you get to choose to try new things and see what sticks, throw stuff against the wall. And this also kind of requires you a little bit to allow yourself to make some mistakes or failures. That's actually how we really learn. And so being willing to make mistakes, to be wrong, to fail, it doesn't mean that it's not going to hurt when those things happen, or that it's not going to be embarrassing, or whatever it is that you might be afraid of. It doesn't mean those things aren't going to happen just because you've decided, hey, I'm willing to make mistakes. But here's the thing. When we take our hands off the wheel and we do our best with who we are and what we have today, it pushes us to trust the Lord, to trust our identity in Him, instead of putting that trust in other people and what they think of us or what they think of our performance. So it's okay to try new things and make mistakes. It's okay to fail and to have something go a little bit haywire. You learn, you take what you learned, and you walk forward with it. And just today, as I was getting ready to record this episode, I was looking for who else is talking about this building the plane while you're flying it concept. And I found a blog post from a nonprofit organization called Jobs for the Future. It's dated back in 2017, and it's written by their senior director, Marty Alvarado. But she talked about this concept of building the plane while flying it. And this was kind of in relationship. I think she was speaking to educators in this blog post. But she said, it captures the feelings of risk and uncertainty that accompany designing innovations and testing them in real time with actual participants, all while being responsible for keeping existing operations running. I thought that was really helpful. This is what you're doing when you don't let planning stand in the way of your doing, of your action. You're taking risks, you're testing things out, you're seeing what sticks, and then you keep doing those things that go well. You see what flops, and then you take time to evaluate why and maybe tweak it a little bit. You ask questions of your audience, of your people, like the people that are impacted by the work that you're doing, and you learn and you iterate and you keep doing, right? Done is better than perfect. So you keep doing. Okay, so a little bit of my personal experience on this. Every season of my podcast has been a little bit different. And clearly, I didn't plan that out from the beginning back in 2016. My interviews have retained a lot of the same topics or questions. Like we're still talking about God-shaped dreams, which is appropriate because that's what the podcast is about. But as I've gotten better at talking about my own dream, and as I've found language about what I really want to share in the podcast, I've changed my introduction. I've engaged differently in my Facebook group. I've opened myself up to more engaging conversations with listeners. Not that they were boring before, but in the past, I think I've been well, I'm not sure what else I would say. But now I've started to ask more questions and, know the types of things I'm interested in learning about from my listeners. I didn't know those things at the beginning. And it's actually been really, really fun to say to a listener, what do you need? And then figure out if I'm the one who can offer that, or if there's another better resource that I can point you to. And what this has done is it forces me to kind of know myself and know my boundaries in my work and my time, and to learn what I need to say no to or to stop doing. But I would never know those things if I didn't try new things on a regular basis. And so try new things. Be willing to make mistakes. Are you getting the picture? Okay, number 4. And this is the last one. Schedule time for reflection and subsequent innovation. So this does have a little bit of planning related to it, right? So I think it's real helpful to not always be flying willy-nilly, but that once you do try some things, that you take the chance to look back. And you already know I'm not great at the reflection piece. I said that at the very beginning, but I do want to get better. And so this is really important and an important aspect of, we're not actually flying in an airplane through the sky, but you are taking risks that might feel a little bit scary and painful and maybe even dangerous to yourself. But this reflection piece is one of those things that if you do this work, it's going to inform what you're going to do next. And so it will feel a little bit less willy-nilly down the road. if you've spent some time looking at the things that you have chosen to do, reflecting on them, and then making decisions to help you go forward. So like I said, I want to get better at this. Reflection is a practice that I really connect with as an educator at heart. And this was part of my training in graduate school. And I know that I should do it, but the type A in me often gets in the way. Like I move on to the next thing way too fast. But this year, I want to take some time, make some time to do it, especially this year that has been so unusual in so many ways and has actually helped me feel a little bit more reflective in my life in the first place. So I've got something planned later this week. So if you're listening to this the week that the podcast drops, which I guess might motivate you to do that in the future, because this is just 2 days away if you're listening to this on Wednesday. And this is going to challenge me in this, and I want to invite you along for the ride. So this is something I've never done before, but on December 18th, that's this coming Friday, I'm hosting a reflection dreaming session via Zoom. You can register to join me for free at bit.ly/dreamer reflection. There's 2 R's right there in the middle of dreamer reflection. And I will send you the Zoom link to join me. I don't have all the details of what this is going to look like, meaning like I'm planning it right now while I'm talking to you. So, we're just going to try it out and see how it goes. Great example, right? Practice what you preach. But here's what I do know. I'm going to bring my calendar, like my 2020 calendar, so that I can look back at things I've documented that I did this year. I will have my laptop, a notebook, maybe some coloring, like colorful pens, gel pens. My kid loves gel pens. And maybe even some coloring pages, like something that I can do while my mind is mulling over some of the things that I end up reflecting on, because I've learned it's often good to like have something to do with your hands as you're dreaming and brainstorming. So whatever you feel like you would need to reflect on what 2020 has been like for you or for your dream. Like if you don't have a dream, feel free to come and just reflect on your year. I'm going to like kind of preemptively say, like, we are not going to spend this time talking. Really, it's going to be 90 minutes on Zoom. And my plan is for us to say hello at the start of the call. And you can jump on like 5 minutes early if you really want to like say hi and introduce yourself. But the idea is for this time to be set aside when you ordinarily maybe wouldn't have taken the time to do this. I mean, this is the week before Christmas, so I get it if this is a busy time and this isn't going to work for you. But for me, at least, if I will schedule the time to do it, and the accountability is that you're going to be there, so I have to show up. But to take the time to reflect on your year, and just allow yourself and your spirit to dream a little bit about what's next. So open invitation for you to be there. That form, bit.ly/dreamer reflection. It's just got a little bit of a registration form where I ask a couple of things about you. I'd love to know a little bit about who's interested in coming to do this. And then we're going to take a few minutes at the end to pray at the end of the 90 minutes. So we're going to do this 2 p.m. Mountain Time, 1 Pacific, 3 Central, 4 Eastern. If you're international, go to like clocktime.com or something and look up and see what your time zone is. But I so would love to have you join me for this. And we'll just like spend some quiet time, like having the time set aside for you to think and reflect on your year, to pray and ask God, like, hey, what would you have for me next? How can I continue to build the plane while I'm flying the plane in my dream? And we're just going to, go into it with open hands and see what the Lord does with the time that we give him. So that's really all I have for today. This is my thoughts on planning your dream while doing your dream. I would love to hear your thoughts or questions about this in the Facebook group. And if you come in and pop a question into the Devoted Dreamers Facebook group, hey, we may end up talking about it on a future episode. But thanks again for joining, and I hope to see you on Friday, December 18th. Thanks for listening today. Don't let the conversation end here. Let's connect over in the Devoted Dreamers Insiders group on Facebook. We're building a sweet community of dreamers so no one has to walk this road alone. You can find the group at bit.ly/dreamergroup. I'll see you in there.